Greetings viewers, and welcome back to Just Short of Fantastic. This week I'm reviewing Ravensbruck, Life and Death in Hitler's Concentration Camp for Women by Sarah Helm. Ravensbruck is a non-fiction history which tells the stories of the women who demonstrated extraordinary courage and resilience in the face of brutal cruelty and institutionalized hatred. It is a book with a massive scope, but the simple message of being heard. Reading this book took me on a remarkable odyssey during which I laughed, cried, and reflected deeply on our ability as human beings to be both unspeakably cruel and heartbreakingly compassionate. I was deeply moved and profoundly touched by the stories of these women who fought and survived one of, if not the, greatest horrors of recent history. At its core, Helm's Ravensbruck is the story of women, all women, who endured Hitler's ideological massacre and Himmler's brutal concentration camp and slave labor machine. But it also takes on those gray narratives of the women who turned against their fellow prisoners in obedience to their SS masters, and those same SS men and women who carried out Himmler's gruesome orders, which included using prisoners for special medical experiments and the mass murder of useless mouths. Helm leaves it up to us to determine how much or how little sympathy we owe to these individuals without ever excusing them of their complicity or guilt. I loved both the grand scope of this history and the special attention paid to the minor details. This book is full of information and narratives that have been overlooked and undervalued in the years since the end of World War II and the Allied victory over Nazi Germany. Woven throughout this history are the personal narratives of the women that Helm tracked down and interviewed. And it also fills in the blanks of those women and groups of women who did not survive to tell their stories or were not asked to tell their stories. One such group of women that really struck a chord with me were the Red Army women who were captured by German forces for their part as medical personnel. These women endured years of brutal internment under the Nazis, during which they were refused POW status, and when they were returned to Russia, they were labeled traitors and terrorized into silence by Stalin. At 664 pages, Helm's work is massive, and she does a very good job of detailing the facts and the chronology of events which brought Ravensbruck into being, how it grew and expanded during the war, what became of it when it fell behind the Iron Curtain, and the ongoing struggle to place this women's camp in the larger narrative now that the West has access to both the physical site and the emotional stories that came into existence there. But where Helm's work really shines is her intimate use of diaries, memoirs, and interview transcripts of the women who lived and died inside this camp. Helm's quest to shine a light on the dark and forgotten corners of this space, too long forgotten by mainstream historians, is breathtaking. These women come alive in the stories that they tell to Helm, and which she uses to chronicle the years of Ravensbruck's existence. The book is divided into 6 parts, plus an epilogue, and each part is divided into chapters which focus on the experiences of a specific group or on a specific individual, usually an SS doctor who could choose those who lived and those who died, but also those brave women among the inmates who took a stand and used their influence to save others and to improve conditions for the sick, the old, and the pregnant. Helm mentions several times within her work that mainstream historians have shown little interest in the concentration camp at Ravensbruck, or the experiences of female prisoners in general. Fortunately, recent trends in alternative histories and the popular rise of feminist narratives have broken the silence and have begun to reverse this neglect. It comes as no surprise to me that I've never heard of this concentration camp, despite being an avid reader of World War II literature and history. But I was shocked and alarmed by this book. It's been 72 years since the end of World War II, and only now are attitudes changing enough for the women to come forward to break their silence and to tell their stories before it's too late. In many of the diaries and memoirs, the women of Ravensbruck often said to each other that they should make films and write books about their experiences, but that they would never be believed. And they were right. When the women returned home, friends, family, and the world told them to be silent. No one wanted to hear their stories. No one wanted to acknowledge their experiences. But I am glad that they were not silent. I am relieved that they told their stories, because we cannot allow ourselves to forget or overlook what women are capable of when they fight and when they refuse. I would recommend this book. Full stop. Be warned, it is heartbreaking, and at times it is very difficult to read. But the stories of these women and the story of Ravensbruck itself are so very, very important. I don't recommend it for book clubs because of its page count, but if you can convince your club to read this, then by all means, the discussions you can have from it will be well worth it. Thank you once again for joining me, and please stay just short of fantastic.